is all over his arm. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gets that call night in, night out for a lot less. He's actually hanging on his arm.
Welcome back to another, I can see it already, controversial edition, maybe a whiny edition of the Enough Said program. My name is Dan Barrero, joined as always by Justin Guard, and to sort of officiate all this, and that's probably the good word for this show today.
There you go, no pun intended.
This particular program, as usual, it's a beaming Lori Fisher. Hi, Lori.
Hi. You know why I'm beaming?
Why?
Because Phil didn't see his shadow, so spring is right around the corner.
Spring's already here.
I was going to say, Phil missed it by a couple of weeks.
It was kind of a no-duh for Phil.
Yeah, I was going to say, if the weather terrorist job was this easy to do, I mean, we'd all be weather terrorists. Anybody could say it's spring. Yeah, it's 56 degrees.
It's going to be in the 50s again.
Yeah, all
soon.
week.
Timberwolves star Anthony Edwards fined $40,000 for publicly criticizing the officiating after the Thunder game on Monday. They won, but he's still upset. Coach Chris Finch says they're encouraging him to have a healthy relationship with refs. Are these growing pains, or are we just all obsessed with officiating? We also, though, have breaking All-Star news in the last 24 hours. Ant and Cat in, Gobert left out. Dan.
Let's start with that. The good news is that you get two of your best players making the All-Star game.
Your pillars.
It's the fourth for Cat and the second for Ant. Is that correct?
Yes, and as Ant says, his first real one, because last year he was an injury replacement. This year he got in.
That's true. And, if the Timberwolves take care of business Friday night, then they also reward the coaching staff. They get to coach the Western Conference All-Stars because we're going back to West versus East. So that's all good. I don't, this is going to be hard to believe for me because I'm known to complain and rip everything. I don't lose my mind about all-star snubs because every year there's somebody who gets snubbed and it gets crazy and people are trying to balance whatever. It's not the end of the world. In my perfect world, I think if I have to say only two Timberwolves All-Stars, I think you and I are in agreement on this. I think I would put Rudy Gobert ahead of Karl Anthony Towns because of the enormous influence he's had on the side of the court that is really what has driven this first place record. But again, I don't think it's the end of the world.
No.
Maybe it'll be the thing that motivates our guy Rudy Gobert.
Well, and I like what they've already said on Friday. First of all, I like the fact that when Karl found out, apparently his dad called him and told him, and he said, how did Rudy not get in? Then he calls Rudy to basically apologize, and Rudy says, Karl, we're fine. It's happened to me before.
Did he say it in French or in English?
I think English.
Okay.
And then, according to Rudy today, he said, when I go into the Hall of Fame, my speech is going to be about how many times I got extra vacation because I was an all-star snub. I think they're all approaching it in a perfect way. I was actually surprised that they got two. I was fully prepared, Dan, as a Minnesotan, to...
You wanted to be mad,
I wanted to be mad.
You wanted to be bitter.
Because you knew Ant was going to get in. In all honesty, I could make the argument that, Ant, maybe of the three of them, doesn't have to be in there. But he was going to be in because of his Team USA and because he's the biggest star on the team and all of that. I had no problems with it. On the officiating thing, I am a Minnesotan. I do think that Ant needs to get more whistles. However, I don't think he helps himself by every time going to the basket, he screams, and you can hear it, whether you're at the game or watching it or sometimes listening to it on the fan. You hear him trying to lobby for the call and sell for the call, and I think officials are human and are saying, we're not going to give it to you every time, Ant. So
and he doesn't deserve it every time.
He got hammered there. That was not marginal contact,
Yeah.
as the league office said the next day.
That's not unprecedented.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. The interesting thing about this is an old issue that we more often associate with Karl Anthony Towns, right?
Yeah.
This year, I'm not saying, Cat's been on his best behavior, but he's been largely, I think, better about it.
He has.
And now he's been replaced by Ant. And oddly enough, I would say, here's how I would try to appeal to Anthony Edwards.
30 seconds.
Great season, individually and collectively. Look at the position you guys are in. You put yourselves on the map. All that means your ability to master the art of working the refs is more important than ever. When we were just an also-ran team, you could argue it didn't matter.
Nobody
Even
cared.
last year, nobody cared. Now, if it's going to get in the way of you not getting borderline calls in key games down the stretch or in the postseason, it hurts us all the more. We had A-Rod in studio at KFAN last summer, and I asked A-Rod, actually pertaining to Cat, what's your best advice to him? Because even the head coach is so frustrated with the overreaction of his own players. He was calling technical fouls on everybody in training camp to set the tone. So, and what did A-Rod say? Work them carefully. basically support them if you think, hey, good call. Or I went back, I saw that call, you were right on that one. That means basically butter them up a little bit. Learn to master that art. If you're screaming every time, you're going to that Luka line, as in Luka Doncic of the Mavericks.
And you don't want to be there.
And you get nowhere with that, and it's actually kind of obnoxious to watch.
Next up, that All-Star game, February 19th, a little bit later this month. CTE is a brain disorder caused by repeated head injuries. There's a new article by ESPN titled How Fears Over CTE in Football Outpaced What Researchers Know. It talks about how exposure of high-profile cases of NFL players affected has led to fear in pros, all the way down to parents of little football players. There's still not a ton of research, and that the research that is out there, though, the writer says suffers from tremendous selection bias. ESPN learned Boston University will release some new research right around Super Bowl week, Dan.
Well, that's a good summation on your part, because it's a complicated story. It's a lengthy story, but it does raise, I think, some important issues, and even, quite frankly, some larger issues, because one of the cliches we like to lecture with online these days is follow the science.
Sure.
In this case, what this story at least suggests, doesn't have to be the last word on it, but suggests, and I think pretty persuasively, is we're getting ahead of the science in some of the warnings that are out there, some of the perceptions, including, for example, linking CTE and suicide. Now, there may well end up being a significant link found, but as I understand it, according to the doctors and scientists and researchers quoted here, that has not been established yet. Yet the headlines and even the perception, I think, is, oh yeah, one thing's got everything to do with the other. There was one sentence I want to get to where I thought they nailed this. The notion to conclude that whatever cognitive or emotional trouble a football player at any age is facing must be rooted in CTE, when it can be much more complicated than that, is a problem. So I think this story is saying, we're not CTE deniers,
right?
Okay? But we are saying, let's try to be a little bit more precise in following the science.
Be aware of what potentially could be harmful.
Yes.
Because there are certainly some cases that appear to be pretty cut and dry, but what we talked about on the radio that stood out to me was that this isn't like a rebuttal column. You know, you have the State of the Union on one side, and then you have the rebuttal the next night. The reporter, one of the reporters that wrote this story, is one that has been on the forefront of all of the original reporting from this institute in Boston. So they, in a way, are responsible for bringing it to everybody's attention. But they're also the same people, Mark Fainaru's name, that is now saying, let's maybe look at it a different way and realize that certainly Chris Nowinski, who's, I think, done a lot of good work out there in Boston to try to bring awareness to this, he also does, whether he wants to believe it or not, have an outcome in mind for a lot of this stuff. And when you're talking about dealing with, the only way you can study this is with deceased football players, right? With brains after death. There's, by definition, a limited amount of people that you've been able to do it. There's a lot of players, including, I think, Matt Burke here locally, who's already pledged his brain to this institute and many have done that. But unfortunately, you can't study this until the person actually dies. So the sample size has been pretty small when you think about it.
Next up, spring training for the Twins starts later this month in Fort Myers. Earlier this week, the team was part of a trade with the Mariners, with second baseman Jorge Polanco going to Seattle. The Twins needing to make some room in their payroll, Dan.
Yeah, this is a cute move, I guess, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you or pretend that I know all that much about the players they got. Allegedly, they got a top 100 prospect, right?
Yep.
And they got a legitimate relief pitcher. That's never bad. The starter is a middle to more likely back of the rotation starter.
Who's coming off injuries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if I don't think anybody, even in the Twins, are trying to say, well, this is our big offseason move. This is nowhere near as big as trading away your best hitter, Arise, a year ago for Pablo, who basically was the key acquisition, was a front-line starting pitcher. I just noticed the Orioles traded for Corbin Burns from Milwaukee.
Okay. That's
a big move. He's considered a 1. And by the way, we wouldn't even though apparently they didn't have to give up much to get him, this is a trade that would have gotten my attention, because he's got, I think, 1 year left on his contract. It's the old, we wouldn't do that because why? He's about to get the big bucks and we're not interested. So they can do this, and I'll miss Polanco because I think he was actually a gamer.
He had a good run.
He had a good run.
Yeah.
They got options which in the infield which allows them to go this route, but this is This is a medium-sized move.
Well, what do you do with the money that you've allegedly saved here, even if you want to buy that premise? And that has been something, you know, Lori even mentioned that the Twins needed to make some room in their payroll. Well, not necessarily. I mean, we can go back to that. The Pohlad Family Trust just sold a bunch of car dealerships for like $700 million. Like, they're going to be okay, right? They're going to be fine. But I even heard it a couple of times on our station this week from ball guys saying, well, and all of a sudden the money just kind of disappears there. They're not sure about what's going to happen with the TV deal. We know at some point they're going to get a TV deal. And I still go back to, it'd be a shame to miss out on the great will that you earned rightfully by smashing through the playoff drought a year ago, by filling Target Field. Rocco Baldelli with you, Dan, a week and a half ago said he couldn't even hear himself think the ballpark was so electric. Why wouldn't you want to keep that going or give yourself every opportunity to keep that going, even if it does mean that, you know what, we're not going to maybe rely on the local TV deal to get us an extra $10 or $15 million. So
well, we're back to
let's see what they do with the money, because that's what they said. They needed to get the money to do this.
Said it before, say it again. They can do this any way they want, and they can justify it in their mind any way they want on the basis of the money that's not coming in. Doesn't mean they have to. Doesn't mean they can't say, you know what, this year, because we want to build on what took place last year, screw it. We're going to go out and spend more money and actually replace Sonny Gray, the other pitcher at the top of the rotation that made this team legitimate a year ago.
97% season ticket renewal rate. I bet they didn't have that.
We have a Super Bowl matchup. The 49ers won the NFC Championship against the Lions, with San Francisco winning 34-31, despite Detroit having a lead a good chunk of the game. And then the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Baltimore Ravens 17-10 in the AFC Championship game. That was the most watched AFC Championship game ever. I wonder
You love
why.
saying that.
I wonder why.
The relish in your voice.
You think so?
With the Chiefs headed to the Super Bowl now, there's some conspiracy theories, though, about tight end Travis Kelce and his girlfriend, superstar Taylor Swift. Right-wing media figures saying the relationship was staged by the NFL, Democrats, and even pharmaceutical giant Pfizer. That the Super Bowl is rigged so Swift can endorse Joe Biden for a second term. You can't make it up, Dan.
Well, I
guess you can make it up.
Part of the rigging was having a Baltimore Ravens player fumble the ball like 2 yards from the end zone, and Lamar Jackson
right at the goal line, yes,
throwing into triple coverage. That was part. So the Ravens were in on the conspiracy too, apparently.
They were, sneakily.
My favorite snarky line, and there are a million of them regarding this nonsense, comes from, I don't know the guy who he is, Lee Kowarski. In solidarity against Taylor Swift, Red America will be rooting with all its heart for, checks notes, San Francisco.
Exactly right.
How brilliant is that? It is, we were talking about polarization during the break. This is apparently the most insane example yet, that like everything else in culture, it becomes red-blue. I call Sharks and Jets rather than red-blue. And this one, though, apparently knows no bounds, because among the conspiracy allegations is a Pentagon psyops, right?
Yes.
So she basically is working for, is the CIA? Which is it? I can't remember which it is.
That
was the headline
asset
on Fox,
yes.
Fox News, not that long ago. It's insane. But I got to tell you, I'm not sure I'm sitting here telling all of that surprised necessarily, because this is what everything ends up getting ground down into.
Well, and it is perfect because Kelce is Mr. Pfizer, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers called him, Mr. Pfizer, Mr. Double Booster. He's doing the ads for it. Taylor has very famously, gone against President Trump a couple of different times, went against a highly touted politician in her home state of Tennessee. You can watch that in one of the Netflix documentaries from a couple of years ago, where she stands up to her father, says, "I'm doing it." And he doesn't want her to, because she's going to alienate a lot of her audience. She didn't care about that. I thought that graphic was fake, Dan, quite frankly, because you always look when it's on social media, you go, is this real? Is this Photoshop? Because you can make anything look like anything.
You can superimpose any headline you want on two people in the screen.
You see media conspiracy theories on the bottom third, I think is what we call it here. The fact that it said, is Taylor Swift a Pentagon asset? And it doesn't appear like that was Photoshopped.
No.
It does tell you.
Well, you saw the smirk on the face of the host, though.
Well, yes, but.
It's almost like he's in on the joke,
seconds.
But guess what? I'm going to milk it. I'm going to manipulate it, because
that's the problem.
The red meat,
yes,
no pun intended, my audience is looking for. Did you see what Larry David said about this, by the way?
That he doesn't care.
He doesn't care. And by the way, he apologized to a puppet.
To Elmo.
That's another story for another day. What's wrong with America?
That didn't make the show.
No, but in all seriousness, you don't have to care.
You don't.
And if you don't care, it doesn't have to be because you're necessarily a right-wing goofball,
Right.
like far right wing, okay?
Right.
But the people who have decided that they're embedded in this nonsense, that I'm obligated as a political righty to somehow be offended by this whole thing, and let's dig into these conspiracies.
said.
It's beyond preposterous.
And I'll say on the other side, we don't have to care that much about them caring this much about this either, because we're getting
Well,
those crazy
I will say,
very
overreactions
true.
too.
That's the game that's played.
At first, I thought the relationship was just kind of a fun thing. Like,
But then you
hey,
saw him
fun
on the
thing.
field, didn't you?
Well,
It's
you guys
love.
both
I mean-
dismissed the relationship a
That's
lot
not
more
true.
cavalierly
No,
than I
no.
did.
That's not true. I
you
thought
did.
Taylor should have played a little harder to get, as opposed to, hey,
I
come
think
to
it's
one of
the
my
real
games.
thing.
I think
It's
it
not
looked
gonna.
good.
It's gonna last 2 years max.
We'll see.
Oh, I think there might be
Until
kids in their
President
future.
Biden gets reelected.
Okay, here we go.
And then
And
we'll
she takes. Do you think she'll get a cabinet position?
maybe.
She
Maybe
doesn't
both
have
of them
time
will.
for that. Neither do. Okay, Republicans are threatening to vote down a bipartisan border compromise to deal with security. Now Democrats are leaning in. Bill tied to foreign aid to Ukraine and Israel. And with the presidential election this year, it's a contentious issue. It always is. We are approaching just about 9 months to Election Day, Dan.
We just talked about this. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I think there is legitimate concern about what's going on at the border, and that this administration has failed. The irony here is, now that they're apparently willing to talk about it, and yeah, you can be the cynic and say, well, because it's in a political, you're not for the right reasons.
sure.
But they're at least talking about it. What are we hearing? Trump basically say any Republican who cooperates with the Dems on this thing and actually gets a bill that might be meaningful, that would help the situation passed, persona non grata. Oklahoma, did you see there's an Oklahoma senator who got sanctioned?
Working a while.
Allegedly
on it
with
too.
his own state. Like, what did he do wrong? He's reaching across
trying to
the
figure it
aisle,
out.
trying to figure out if there's a solution here. So whatever high ground you had on, yeah, we got the Dems on the run here, is completely lost if at the moment of truth you go, yeah, it's a serious problem, but we don't want to fix it yet during an election.
We'd rather not give him the win, talking about President Biden. And in the meantime, Lori mentioned it, it's 9 months into the election. So if you just punt it, that you're talking about 9 months at least where you wouldn't be solving the problem, and whoever was elected, and then you're talking about another month, another 2.
Minimum, it's basically another year. You're
The
right.
estimates are that 2 million more people could come here that probably shouldn't be coming here, right? In that time, the crisis could widen to that much because the numbers are insane. Even going back from 2022 or 2020 to where they are now in 2024, the numbers continue to grow exponentially. So, I mean, it's weird that they are seemingly handing this back to the Democrats and saying
that's exactly what they're doing.
And,
It's stupid
because,
politically.
and I don't know how else you handle it, because you could say, well, funny, we wanted to do this for the last couple of years, but now that it's 2024 and you know the election's coming up and you know you have to fix it, you finally come to the table. But
30
use that
seconds.
as the message. Use that as the message moving forward and saying, and so we got your deal done. We figured it out. We helped you even though you had no interest for 3 years of doing it. And now once we get our guy back in the White House, which is what they want eventually, we're going to do what we want to do there. It makes no sense to do it this way.
Final point.
Political Observer made a great point on this. This is part of a larger issue that we've kind of, I think, touched on before, that involves both parties. But in this case, House Republicans in this Congress have a tendency to treat the House as a platform for performance
That's
art.
it. Yep.
These performances often use Congress not only as a stage, but also as a foil, treating the bargaining and deal making, you know, how you make the sausage, the boring stuff, that is the essence, or supposed to be the essence, of legislative work as a form of corruption. Many are less interested in substantive policy concessions than in positioning themselves as outside observers in a morality play in which they can shake their fists, get their moment on social media, and really never worry about how are we getting any significant
We gotta move on.
done.
By the way, economy looks decent. Fed's going to lower some rates.
Another great
Inflation
day for the
looks
economy
okay.
today, yeah.
A lot of jobs in January. Like,
Up next.
Going to hand over something else? Because a lot of the other stuff's looking okay.
This next topic taken right from Good Day, because Dan and Justin love our Good Day show.
We do.
Every morning, weekdays, 9 a.m.
I think I'm more loyal than he is.
You are, but
Well, yeah.
I'm still trying to get both of you on. It is Girl Scout cookie time. A troop mom posted on social media to just say no thank you if you don't want to buy cookies. She was taken aback by how often people
opposed to
mention
what?
their diet or that they'd eat an entire box. And, you know, she's really about, like, you shouldn't talk about your body issues with little girls. They're just trying to sell cookies.
Well, you've
Just
rigged
say
it.
no, thank you.
Boy, Lori's rigged this
I just got to
debate,
tell
I
you
can
real
see.
quick. I'm going to say, I think that parents of the Girl Scouts should just have a pre-talk with the girls about how what they might hear from people, to like brace them for that they might hear that. And then I think adults, the buyers, the potential buyers, shouldn't just say that because you know they're just trying to save face because they don't want to buy cookies.
Well, I reject that premise.
That's
first of
cynical.
all. That's about you've rigged this to where I don't even know where I begin.
We need Alex Kendall back in
It was
here.
Alex Kendall,
Yeah.
I think, who made the point that I was inspired by and that I agree with, which is she acknowledges all the issues Lori just did. We all do. But it's a balancing act that we have to remember. And if in that balancing act we no longer feel we can say, for example, as Alex did, well, these cookies these aren't meals. These are for snack
They're
purposes.
treats.
If you can't talk about, you balance the concerns about body issues with trying to encourage in any of our children, boys, girls, whoever, that healthy food habits are associated with health in general, we're doomed. And I would say, again, if there's a parent who rants for 5 minutes about, God, these cookies are awful.
Right.
I've been on 4 diets and I can't get any cookies this year.
Right.
Okay, I get it. But if it's a simple statement, part of what you do teaching your kids is you're going to hear some stuff that you might have to process.
Right.
But I can't put you in a bubble forever, and I'll try to give you some guidelines. But I just think that this was an utter and complete overreaction on the part of one mother.
Well, I'm gonna need to see the research that's telling a 7-year-old that I don't want to buy the cookies because I'm on a diet is going to send them off in a spiral for the rest of their life. So I'm not sure we have the research there that's going to be like that. I do like, though, within it, though, the sales training of, well, we have low sugar options. Like they just turn the page, they turn it right back. Yeah. Oh, you're trying to watch your figure? You're trying to lose some weight? You're trying not to go crazy? Well, we happen to have these gluten-free ones, and these are lower calorie cookies as well. So even in it got turned for me a little bit in that, which was funny to give the 9-year-old a way to never take no for an answer. When
Lori, can we get Lori back for a second? We got a minute?
Yes, we have about 30 seconds.
In all seriousness, because I want your opinion on this, and I respect it, but I think even you, believe, all right, yeah, we have to send messages. The notion that we can't ever say anything to a girl about food is in itself unhealthy because it leaves out an important series of messages that do need to at least be encouraged.
No, and I agree with you there. I mean, I have boys, but I am a girl, so I get it, and you guys have girls. My only thing is just I feel like people shouldn't. I stand by the don't offload on these little girls.
But how often is that happening?
I do understand that we should be
offload,
talking.
I think that's too loaded a term to Gargie's point. I don't believe. I
see them in the lobby of our office building. It doesn't seem like people are offloading on them as they're going up to their
music.
These kids, I give them a little more credit that they can actually absorb some things without necessarily internalizing all of it.
Enough said. I mean, wow. This could dedicate
now I kind of want to offload.
I feel like I should have studied up more on this.
Now I want to offload.
Maybe we need a podcast.
Kids.
Welcome back to Enough Said. Because you had so much to say, we have time for one thing.
A real lightning round.
The show, Curb Your Enthusiasm, is really ending this time with it being in its 12th and final season. HBO comedy has been on the air for more than 2 decades, guys.
I'm in the group that loves every minute of it, although I think Larry lost a little something.
Really?
Well, he went on, was it the Today Show?
Oh, when he apologized to Elmo?
He punched Elmo. That's Larry David. But then he apologized later for it.
Kind of.
The Larry David in the show would never have apologized for that.
True.
So I'm a little worried. Is he softening?
Justin, real quick.
There's still room for a local version with our own Larry David, Dan Barrero, because you're the only person I know whose life somewhat mirrors where things happen to you that happen to nobody else.
How many episodes could I have written? We've talked about this on the radio.
We wrote one in 4 minutes.
Enough said.
Unbelievable.
100%.
Deli meat, your phone. It's unbelievable.
Dan's more.